Hello, Randy Rain here. For this maker project, I need to make a foam rubber one of these. Sort of. I need to make a foam rubber hatchet. Of course, this hatchet is not the kind I want. I want the old, antique, murderous, vintage looking hatchet, not a brand new one like this. So the first thing to do is I need a mold. So I need something to mold, and I need a hatchet. So I could go to every antique store I could find and try to find an old hatchet, or I can just make this one look old, which is what I'm going to do. So this is how I'm going to do it. The first thing I'm going to do is get rid of this nub. I don't like that. I think it needs to be cut off. It looks too modern. It looks too much like a roofer's hammer. So I'm going to chop that off, and that's what I'm going to do now. Now, this is what it used to look like. This is what it looks like now. Next step is I need to make it look not so modern. So back to grinding. Again, this is the way it started off. This is the way it looks now. Let's see. Now it's time to work on this wooden handle. Peel all these stickers off and go to town making this look ugly. This is how I'm going to do it. Before, after. Now I really don't need to worry about what it looks like because it's going to look different when I make it in the mold. Really, it's what it feels like. So I need to make this metal look like it's been pitted and aged. And since the metal is very hard, I have a better way. This is how I'm going to do that. The first thing I'm going to do is use some masking tape and mask off the handle. Then I'm going to take some flat black spray paint and spray the entire thing. And then I'm going to beat it around and scratch up the paint. Now I'm going to paint it with this frosted paint. It's for frosting glass. It leaves a rough surface to the finish. It's perfect for old pitted metal. Now it's time to make a mold. I have my hatchet. I have a piece of foam board, and I'm going to trace an outline all the way around. So after I've made my outline, I'm kind of just marking out generally how the mold is going to be structured. It's going to be an L shape, something like that. And so now I'll go cut this out and get it closer. And I will also cut strips that I will need to make the sides that go along each of these pieces. Now once I have my basic shape here, the table saw only cut it out square, and there's no reason it has to be square. So now I'm just going to use a straight edge and an X-Acto knife to get it closer to being exactly where I want it. Now on this new piece here, I'm going to go ahead and center it better on the other side and draw it out again. And now I'm going to cut it out. Doesn't have to be exact. Just got to get close. Yeah, this should fit. Like so. Perfect. I have here sulfur-free clay. It's an oil-based sulfur-free clay. That's something you have to have when using silicone. And I'm going to use some of this to prop up the hatchet off the table. And I'm going to prop it up this about as much as I'm going to want the thickness of the silicone to be on that side. Now I have my divider piece slightly lower than halfway around because clay is going to go on top of it, so it doesn't need to be exactly half, it needs to be just a little bit lower. And now I'm going to take my 3-inch pieces and a hot glue gun and start building up the walls. If I hold it flush with one end, make a mark, draw a line, and then when I cut, I don't cut all the way through, I just cut the top layer of paper of the foam board so it bends. Just little dabs at this point. I also want to glue it down to my board so that it doesn't move. Not a lot, just in spots. Hey. To fix problems like this where it's floppy and you're having a hard time with putting the clay down, cut a hole just with the little X-Acto knife, drop in a dowel, put a little hot glue on top. That'll keep it from bending down as you apply the clay. Once I have it all secured up, I have all the corners sealed, I get rid of the hot glue cobwebs. It's now time to lay clay through the whole thing. The reason I use this divider all the way around is to save on clay. Don't need near as much if I already have it built up close to where I need it. So the idea now is to put a thin layer of clay all the way around, up against here, up against the edges, and seal off this entire thing all the way around so that when the silicone gets poured on top, it will not leak down into anywhere. You can also just use a pair of scissors and cut your pieces. Now that the clay has been laid down, now I have to go back and go on every edge with more clay to make sure it is good and sealed up against it. I found that popsicle sticks and the back ends of brushes allows you to get the clay nice and tight up against the piece. Avoid feathering the clay so it swoops up onto the piece. Try to get it as blunt towards the piece as you can. That way the mold pieces will be as blunt as well, and you'll get a better seam across here. This is where the foam rubber will be poured in. It will settle down here and expand upwards. To keep it from getting caught in an air pocket here, there needs to be vent holes coming up here. I see a problem area here. This would be a good place to vent as well. At the top, I will need to build the pour spot and another vent hole there. First thing I'm going to do is build up some more here where this vent is going to go. So I'm going to be mashing it down into the clay, so I need to make sure there's plenty of clay there. Just going to use toothpicks that will make the vent. Trim it to length. The point of the toothpick is the part that's touching the hatchet, and the rest is going to the corner. When I make the mold, this will end up being a small tunnel that the air can escape when the foam starts expanding. I'm going to make this little funnel shape out of clay, and it's going to be my pour spout down here. I'm going to cut it in half for this side. I want it big enough that my rod will go into, but also small enough to leave a lip so that it's harder for the dowel rod to come out. And I will take a piece of dowel rod to make a vent hole on the other side. Now it's time to make indicator location knobs. What I like to do is use the clay and make these little ant hills sporadically throughout. Now I like to go the opposite direction and go into the clay, and I just use the back side of my X-Acto knife and make some little divots. Now I like to take the end of a paintbrush and go around and fill in more
just where I think it could use a little bit more location marks. Only thing left now is a release agent.
It's been around 16 hours. It's all cured. It's time to do the other side. I'm going to start by cutting my spots that I have it glued down to the board with. And this is why I don't do very many. See a couple of leak spots through there, not too bad. And now I have to dig all of this out. And now I'll dig out the clay. I need to clean up any of this that have seeped through so that I get a nice clean edge. Now I have to seal the edges on this side with hot glue. Now it's time to add a release agent to this side. Alright, it's all fully cured. It's time for the revealing. Alright, time to peel it open. Now go in and clean up these vent holes to make sure they're free and can vent. Now it's time to go into the oven for some post-curing. Instructions say 150 degrees. 170 is as low as my oven can go, but I've done this many times and it works just fine. So we made it to here. Time for the big finale. Time to actually make this foam rubber hatchet. Alright, so this is very messy, so I've laid down a piece of cloth, my 2 mold halves, and I have powdered pigments. Now these are iron oxide pigments and aluminum basically pigments, and they're in powder forms, and they're going to go onto the mold themselves. And this is how I do it. Alright, I'm going to start with the handle before I start here because the silver powder is very light and it'll get onto the handle part and you'll have silver part in the handle. So it's better to get a little bit of the handle color onto this than a little bit of this color getting onto there. Step 1 is taking some black powdered pigment, lightly getting it on the brush. You want to just very lightly hit, and you're only hitting the raised spots, which is going to be the grooves or the grain of the wood. I want to do it up here a little bit too. Just a little bit here and there. Next I'm going to do the same thing, but with a dark brown pigment. And this brown is on the red side of brown. Matter of fact, it's rust is all it is. It's straight up iron oxide. And just kind of going over it to give it now this brown tint to it. But not completely covering it, still doing it very, very lightly. Add some rust to the metal piece up here. Just, you can go heavy some places and light. It's all how you feel. Now I have a light brown, but this brown is on the green side. I'm going opposite of the dark brown that I put down first. And this one is going on heavy. And I want to make sure I get here as well. I cut this piece out of MDF. It's a 1/2-inch piece of MDF, roughly in the shape here. And it's nice and flat, so I know my mold is going to be nice and flat. I have this straight edge here that I know that straight edge was straight when I made the mold. So as long as that's straight and it's flat, it's in the position that the hatchet was when the mold was made. And then I just have a piece of foam board to lay on top so I can sandwich everything with some of this cord. Ready to pour. Alright, it's time to pour. I'm just going to guess from experience on how much of this that it's going to take. Foam rubber is definitely one of those things you want to stir very, very, very well. And my stir stick here is the dowel rod that goes inside. Once the foam reaches to the top, put some backfill pressure onto it. Plug up the hole, force it out the vent to make sure it gets everywhere. And now we wait. Alright, let's see what we have.
time to trim the flashing, the excess foam. I have a lot of mushrooms like this. I also use cuticle trimmers to get down into spots that are hard to get to. To fix any spots, just take more of the powdered pigment . Well, there it is, folks. I hope it's everything you expected it to be. One foam rubber hatchet. If you would like one of these, go to raincloudmagic.com and you can have one from the very mold you just watched me make. If you like my video, please like and share because I want to make more and people need to see them. So please subscribe, like, share, and go get you a hatchet.